Hey, what's up, people? Pizzal here, and I'm going to talk to you guys about Scream Factory's newest collector's edition Blu-ray release for William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist 3. Now, this is a 2-disc release, and it is absolutely loaded, so bear with me, strap yourselves in. This is going to be a long video. I'm mostly going to talk about the extras on this release. I will talk about the movies just a little bit, more so the director's cut, because that's one of the big selling points of this release, is that we are seeing the director's cut of The Exorcist 3, aka Legion, for the very first time. And I'm a huge fan of The Exorcist 3, the theatrical version of the film, so watching the director's cut was definitely an interesting experience. But like with all Scream Factory's collector's edition releases, we've got a slipcase here with some newly commissioned art that I think is pretty cool. We have the reversible sleeve here with the original poster art there. And we have got, as I said, a loaded release here. So without further ado, let's go ahead. I've got several pages, people. Several pages. Bear with me. Disc 1 is the theatrical version of the film. It features a new 2K scan of the theatrical cut with a 5.1 DTS HD master audio. It looks great. It sounds great. The picture quality and the sound quality are both great on the theatrical version of The Exorcist 3. We have got a vintage featurette on the making of Exorcist 3. It's just over 7 minutes. We've got interviews with William Peter Blatty, George C. Scott, producer Carter D. Haven, Jason Miller, James G. Robinson, with a lot of behind-the-scenes footage. We've got deleted scenes, alternate takes, and bloopers. We've got a deleted scene called The Clown Birthday, which is basically just a clown in the hospital coming for a kid's birthday party who is in the hospital. Very brief. We've got an alternate confessional murder scene. Just an alternate take on that one, really. It looked and sounded pretty much exactly like the one from the theatrical version of the film. We have got a alternate takes of the nurse and the robed figure with the large shears, which was actually pretty interesting. There's one take where you see you're in the killer's POV as he's following the nurse with the shears getting closer and closer to her head. And then there's another take that's like from very low angle where she closes the door and walks away and he comes out right behind her with those shears. But definitely the take that's in the film, they definitely went with the right take for that sequence. Brilliant sequence, by the way. Just love that sequence. Perfectly choreographed. Just brilliant sequence. And we've got some bloopers, which are, of course, them flubbing their lines and stuff like that. So pretty interesting there. We've got a deleted prologue sequence, which takes place in 1975. It shows Father Karras jumping out the window and going down the stairs and dying. And then it cuts to a scene where the Gemini killer has been executed. And he's laying on the slab, and the doctors are checking him to make sure that he is in fact dead. And George C. Scott's character is there, and there's a really interesting sort of moment between George C. Scott's character and the Gemini's dead body at the end there, where he sort of puts his hand on the Gemini killer's chest. I'm not sure what that was about, but pretty interesting. And we've got 38 and a half minutes of vintage interviews, a lot of on-set interviews and stuff with William Peter Blatty, James G. Robinson, Larry King, C. Everett Koop, Ed Flanders, George C. Scott, Grand Bush, Leslie Dilley, and Jason Miller. Disc 1 is rounded out with a photo gallery, trailers, and TV spots. So a lot of stuff there on Disc 1 of this release. Disc 2 is the director's cut of the movie. And now how they did the director's cut was they were unable, basically the footage that they had for the director's cut was VHS daily footage. It doesn't look that great. It doesn't particularly sound that great, but you get to see as close to William Peter Blatty's director's cut of The Exorcist 3, aka Legion, as you're probably ever going to see. And the movie, the director's cut of the film, which it doesn't have that exorcism at the end, which William Peter Blatty was forced to sort of direct. I mean, it's odd that, you know, they greenlit this movie based on his novel Legion. They wanted to call it Exorcist. Originally, the film, during production, it was called The Exorcist 1990. So they eventually decided, well, hey, let's let everybody know that this is an Exorcist movie. Let's call it The Exorcist 3, which Blatty absolutely hated. He begged them not to call it The Exorcist 3. They called it The Exorcist 3 anyway. Then they realized, well, wait a minute. There's no exorcism in this movie. So Blatty had to go back and shoot an exorcism. The director's cut does not have that exorcism in it. Jason Miller is not in the director's cut of the film. It's all Brad Dourif. And it ends with George C. Scott after the scene where the possessed nurse has tried to kill George C. Scott's daughter with those big shears. He goes back to the hospital and basically just shoots Brad Dourif's character. And that's it. Just kind of a really low-key, almost, dare I say, anticlimactic kind of ending. Particularly if you're like me and you're very much accustomed to the theatrical version of the film. Seeing that version and that ending was kind of a little bit anticlimactic. I'll just leave it at that. But I'm glad that I finally got to see the director's cut of Exorcist 3, aka Legion. Not a lot of differences in there. Some sequences are a little longer. Just some character interactions, really, some extra dialogue. All the sequences between George C. Scott and Brad Dourif were actually shot in a different location, but it's pretty much the same dialogue. What I think is really interesting about seeing the director's cut of Exorcist 3 or William Peter Blatty's Legion is that, you know, that just that added on exorcism in the film sort of changes kind of, I don't want to say the tone, but maybe kind of the mood of the movie a little bit. You kind of see where I think Blatty's headspace was while making that film. Somebody on the extras for this Blu-ray, they say that the initial idea behind what became The Exorcist 3 was really that it would be a story, a detective story, a psychological detective story. And then it turned into a supernatural possession movie. And, you know, Blatty's intent was to take this version away from some of the more supernatural, paranormal elements of The Exorcist, and I think sort of ground it in a different, almost, universe, really. It's pretty interesting to watch this version and really see how much the tone and the mood of a movie can change just with a few reshoots. Now, granted, that tacked on exorcism is pretty, you know what I mean? It's pretty significant, but, you know, it does sort of change the feel of the movie. As far as the extras are concerned, we have got a 1 hour and 40-minute audio interview with writer-director William Peter Blatty, conducted by Michael Felcher. And they use it kind of like a audio commentary over the director's cut of the film. And it is extensive. Blatty discusses how he began his career writing comedy, but comedy wasn't selling, so he started writing The Exorcist. Blatty discusses what inspired him to write the book's journey to the big screen, the movie's controversy and success. Blatty discusses his reaction to Warner Brothers wanting a sequel and how they ended up giving him a small fortune for the rights to make a sequel to The Exorcist. He also discusses how he watched the movie in a crowded theater, and how it wasn't very long into the movie that everyone in the theater was cracking up. Blatty discusses writing the novel Legion. He also discusses directing the film The Ninth Configuration and all the craziness that went on while making that film. Blatty discusses how he begged the studio not to call The Exorcist 1990 The Exorcist 3. He also discusses shooting the film, the reshoots that they forced him to do, involving that tacked-on exorcism to appease Morgan Creek, and how the film came and went theatrically pretty quickly, and how, the movies enjoyed this resurgence over the years. Really informative, exhaustive, really nice interview. Less an interview and more of just a discussion between Michael Felsher and William Peter Blatty, just like a couple of old friends talking about movies. Really enjoyable. I would say that this alone is worth the price of admission for, the price of purchase for this Blu-ray release. This was a great interview / discussion with William Peter Blatty. We've also got a multi-part making of Exorcist 3 documentary called Death Not Be Proud. Chapter 1 is 24 minutes and 30 seconds. It's called A Wonderful Time. It's an interview with composer Barry Dvorzin, producer Carter DeHaven, Brad Dourif, makeup effects artist Michael Smithson, William Forsh, production designer Leslie Dilley, co-editor Todd Ramsey, and many other members of the cast and crew. They all reflect on seeing The Exorcist for the first time and what kind of a game changer it was, particularly for special makeup effects. They discuss how awful the second film was. They discuss how The Exorcist 3 came to be from Blatty's novel Legion, and how the film was initially titled The Exorcist 1990. They discuss the shooting of the film, behind the scenes, how the original story of the film was really more of a psychological detective story than a supernatural possession film. Really nice there. Chapter 2, we've got Signs of the Gemini, a 17-minute, 42-second interview with Brad Dourif. Dourif discusses how Blatty originally wanted Jason Miller for the role, but that Miller was, quote-unquote, too far gone into alcoholism for him to be able to portray the role. So Blatty cast him as the Gemini, and how the story turned his... Dourif talks about reading the script for the first time, and he knew he wanted to make the film because the script, just reading it, turned his stomach. He discusses working with George C. Scott, being directed by William Peter Blatty. He discusses the Gemini Killer's backstory, performing all those long monologues in the film, and how he had to do it all twice when Jason Miller suddenly became available during the reshoots, and all of his, basically everything with Brad Dourif had to be reshot. Really nice interview with Brad Dourif here. Chapter 3 is entitled The Devil in the Details. It's just over 18 minutes. It's an interview with production designer Leslie Dilley, assistant designer Darren Doctorman, and concept illustrator Simon Merton. They discuss the sets and locations in the film. They discuss designing the storyboards and the sets for the movie. They discuss how they kind of made the sets look a lot bigger than they actually were through the use of forced perspective. They discuss those shears in the movie were actually designed specifically. Those shears don't, I guess, exist. They had to design those. But yeah, interesting conversation with them. Chapter 4 is called Music for a Padded Cell. It's 15 minutes and 16 seconds. An interview with composer Barry Dvorzin. He discusses how he started in pop music and then moved to composing music for film. He describes his approach to composing music for movies and how he tackled the Exorcist 3 score. Interesting conversation with Mr. Dvorzin. Chapter 5 is entitled All This Bleeding. It is a 28.5-minute interview with co-director Todd Ramsey, production manager Ronald Colby, makeup effects crew Mike Smith, Brian Wade, and William Forsh, as well as Charles Powell, who was Jason Miller's double in the film. They discuss the arguments between Blatty and the studio over the studio's insistence to include an exorcism in the film and the reshoots Blatty had to do to include that exorcism, and how those reshoots were problematic, to say the least, with all of the effects, the snakes, the rain, shortened prep time, and of course the tension on set during the reshoots, because nobody wanted to be involved in those reshoots, and it definitely showed. Very interesting conversation here. And that is everything on disc 2. So we have a basically a feature-length interview / discussion with William Peter Blatty, and a feature-length making of all about The Exorcist 3. If you are a fan of The Exorcist 3, this is definitely the way to go. The theatrical version looks great. It sounds great. Lots of extras on this release, and for the first time ever, you will get to see the director's cut of The Exorcist 3, aka Legion. Definitely go check it out. Perfect pickup for this Halloween season as well. Love this movie. Really glad that I got to see that the director's cut of the film, and yeah, really nice loaded release from the folks over at Scream Factory. Let me know your thoughts on The Exorcist 3 in the comment section below. Are you looking forward to this Blu-ray release? Have you pre-ordered this Blu-ray release? Let me know in the comments section below. If you liked the video, please leave it a thumbs up. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. They're also right around here. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys out there are all having a great October, a great Halloween season. Take care, and until next time, peace. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.